morning to all of you, and thank you for joining us on this beautiful Saturday morning. My name is Gloria Zelaya, and I am one of the counselors with Fulfillment Fund. I work with the UCLA School in the RFK Community School Group, and I also work with students at Apex High School, as well as some additional mentor students and the RISE Scholars. Today, we're actually going to give you an introduction to the University of California and the California State University, some of their unique programs, and some of their offerings. As we consider what we will review today, we will have an introduction to the public system of higher education. Although it will be short, it is a very brief introduction so that you are all aware of what the public higher education system looks like. We will have an overview of both UC and CSU systems with some highlights into their programs and majors. We will talk about admissions requirements as well as go over the admissions review process. But before we get started, let us do a poll. I want to see how well informed or how well you recognize the different offerings at the Cal States and UCs. On the screen, you see 4 different images and the poll has already gone up. Let's take a look and see what you think, where you think these schools are. So in the first image, you're going to see a ship, and this school actually is the only school on the West Coast that does train their students on a 500-foot ship. Do you think that that is a UC school, or do you think that that is a Cal State school? If you can go ahead and select that in the poll. Image 2 that you will see talks about the internet and its beginnings. It was started at one of the California state schools. The question is, which one was it started at? Was it a UC or was it a CSU? Alejandra, it looks like they can't vote. It says that, are they able to vote? If you can,
people are voting.
They are? Oh, okay. And then the third image is DeCal. It's a program that allows students to run courses, create their own majors, establish a curriculum that is non-traditional. And the last, which is actually my favorite because I never knew that this happened at a Cal State or UC, is where was the waterbed invented? It was invented in a Bay Area school. The question is it a UC or is it a CSU? So once we see that most people have voted, can we see what the poll results are?
We're at 60% of participants. If everybody can finish up the polls, we'll close them out shortly.
So we'll give you guys just a couple more seconds. Oh, there we go. So here are the results. Poll 1. Wow, so you're all pretty even when it comes to who teaches and trains on a ship. It's actually a Cal State. Cal Maritime University is the only university on the West Coast that allows its students to train on a boat, and it's actually part of their requirement for graduation. The internet was, as a lot of you guessed, started at UCLA. Interestingly enough, after they sent the first message to Stanford University, the computer that they used crashed. And so now we have the internet as we know it. The campus that allows students to run courses and majors with the UCs. Specifically Berkeley, it is a program on their campus. And I knew a lot of you would guess that the waterbed would be a UC invention, in particular because I put it was a Bay Area school, but it's actually a Cal State invention. It was invented in San Francisco State. So some of you seem to have some really good concepts and ideas of what Cal States and UCs offer. And I thank you all for participating in this fun little poll. But as we move forward and we start really talking about higher education in California, the public school system in California really is made up of 3 different systems: the community college schools, the University of California, and the California State Schools. schools. Now, in this presentation, we really will only focus on UCs and Cal States, but I did want to mention that community colleges are also part of that public school program. As you take a look at the University of California, some of its distinctive features or different features from the Cal State is that it does have 10 university campuses. Now, the university campuses are Davis, Berkeley, San Francisco, Santa Cruz, Merced, Santa Barbara, Los Angeles, Irvine, San Diego, and Riverside. However, even though there are 10 campuses, only 9 of those campuses really do offer an undergraduate program. The University of San Francisco in and of itself is only a medical school and a graduate program. They do have 5 medical schools on campus or 5 medical centers, and those are in San Francisco, Davis, they are in Irvine, San Diego. So San Francisco, Davis, Irvine, San Diego, and then you will also find one in Berkeley. And they have 3 national laboratories where they have been doing work for a considerable amount of time that has to do with energy and energy resources. Now, to no surprise, the University of California, oh, so sorry, does have some wonderful majors. They do offer more than 700 majors across all of their campuses. And listed here are some of the majors that would be considered to be more popular or traditional majors that make them be a little bit more distinctive. So as you look at the University of California, know that you will be able to major in some of the traditionals like English, math, psychology, business, but then you're also looking at slightly different majors in the health services, engineering, and then of course every year there is a review or evaluation of the critical needs in the workforce that also prompts the beginning and creation of new majors. And so this year, some of the new majors that are offered at the University of California are critical race and ethnic studies, which is actually a minor, material science and engineering minors, and then a geospatial technology minor. In addition to that, they have also added some additional majors in data analysis and the data sciences. Learning does go beyond the classroom at the University of California and is not limited to the 4 walls or the campus. So students are able to study abroad at 40 countries. And they have the opportunity to partake in 3 different types of study abroad programs. They can go on an internship program, which allows them to work within the field that they are studying. They can go on a traditional immersion program, which simply means that they go to Spain. They would take classes at a university in Spain that works with the UC system, and then they would immerse themselves into the culture. Now, in addition to that, research is a big part of the philosophy and mission of the university. Because students are encouraged to do research, you will find that professors and departments readily open their doors for students to do undergraduate research. One of the additional aspects of the University of California that allows you to implement the theory in the classroom to what you are going to do once you graduate is the Work and Learn program. Now, this is a particular program at Berkeley, and what students are able to do is they're able to take the love of their major or really take what they're learning in the classroom and apply it to the archiving process in the library at Berkeley. So they're able to digitize some manuscripts, perhaps if they're in English, that have been around for a very long time and perhaps are not in the best condition. And so now they have the opportunity to preserve them. They're able to create digital maps and do a variety of different types of work that really involve the theory from the classroom and putting it into application to preserving some great documentation. Students that are interested in studying about government have the opportunity to do so at Washington, D.C. So you can spend a semester at Washington, D.C., learning how government works, working with, governors and senators, and really getting your hands-on experience as to how politics moves in this country. And of course, because you are a student at the University of California, you are able to take a semester at a different school so that it is considered a visiting program because you would be leaving your campus. Let's say you're at UCLA, but you've decided, oh, I really want to see what Santa Cruz is like. And they've got some classes that are really curious or that I really want to be a part of, then at that point in time, you can choose to actually apply to go and study at Santa Cruz, and then you would spend some time there. So housing, if you are going to school as an incoming freshman, I would definitely say and recommend that you try to live on campus. Although it can be expensive, it definitely shapes the experience of your freshman year, which then, of course, moves on to how you will relate to campus and students and create community for the remainder of your time on campus. So there are different types of housing that you will be able to partake in. Of course, you have the traditional residence hall housing where there's 2 or 3 of you to a room and you share a room with people, you share a communal bathroom, and you kind of just figure it out. But there is also something that's called specialty housing. Now, specialty housing can either be academic or social in nature. So for example, the WISE Empowering House is a place where you would have women who are studying in the STEM field or the STEAM field to live together, share community. Of course, intellectually, they're able to exchange ideas. Perhaps they're in the same classes and are able to create different groups to work together and collaborate within their studies at their schools. Now, Aristotle House, very similar. You have the opportunity to engage in different type of interdisciplinary education, and you're able to really take the time to commingle with people, not just socially, but on a more personal intellectual level. And then, of course, there's themed housing. And themed housing is a little different from specialty housing because themed housing really comes down to cultural identification sometimes. So there may be a house that is for Latino students, or there may be a house that is known as the Black student house on campus, or it could be a gender house. So the themed housing is more of a social personal nature versus specialty housing, which would be more of an academic environment. And I think that as we consider cost of education, which is something that is always on everyone's mind, we begin to really consider what it takes or what is part of the financial cost of a college education. And so a lot of people will say, oh, a UC education is an expensive education. And although, yes, you are correct, it is expensive. In the next slide, we're going to talk a little bit more about financial aid and how financial aid will come into play as you consider your places of education. In general, for the entire UC system, your tuition will be the same across all campuses. Now, where you are going to see differences is in room and board, of course, also in books and supplies. So, every school is going to be a little different. Know that this is the cost of education. That is a general estimate. Again, the tuition will be the same across the board. Now, I do think that we have a poll before we fully move into financial aid. No, let's not do that poll because we haven't talked about that yet. So let's talk a little bit about financial aid. Okay, so this is the correct poll. How many undergraduate campuses are part of the UC system? Would you say 10, 5, or 9? The keyword here is undergraduate UC campuses. So we'll give you a few minutes to do the poll. And then Alejandra, when most students have voted or most attendees have voted, can we just show the poll, please? So most of you, well, actually, it's pretty even across the way. You all have different uh, numbers. So let's just kind of go over it again. There are 10 UC campuses, but there are only 9 undergraduate campuses. And the number 5 actually is the number of medical schools affiliated with the UC system. So in some way, there are a lot of different schools to look at, but for undergraduate application, there really are only 9. Remember that San Francisco is only a medical school and therefore only a graduate program. So we talked about financial aid, we talked about the cost of education, and we know that the tuition at a UC is around $14,000. Now, again, room and board, I'm going to go back to that previous slide before we do that again, before we talk about financial aid fully. And again, room and board is going to vary depending on the school that you attend. But on average, it is going to be somewhere around $17,000 or $18,000 should you live on campus. Of course, that is a lot of money. $36,000 in education at a UC can range anywhere between $36,000 to about $43,000, depending on the school and the room for the student. However, a great number of students do have financial aid on campus, and you will find that if you're a student whose family's income is between $0 to $80,000, you actually are in a range for your pay for your college education at a UC. So if your family's income is anywhere between $0 and $80,000, remember that your education at a UC is going to be free. So that is actually a really important thing to note. That makes education more accessible. It definitely makes it a lot more affordable as you consider what places you will select during your application process. In addition to that, there are, for students whose income perhaps does not fall in that range, know that there are scholarships that are awarded by the UCs. And the scholarship award on average every year per student is about $18,000. So know that there is some additional support there. 56% of undergraduates who are at the UCs do not pay tuition. And so that is also an encouraging number. And 71% of students are actually receiving some form of financial aid. So even though $36,000 a year, $43,000 a year can sound like a scary number, know that the UCs are definitely taking steps to ensure that education is something that is very affordable to all of you. Now, let's talk a little bit about the admissions process. So the admissions process at the UCs really is dictated by GPA score. So in order for you to be able to apply to a UC, you do need to have a minimum of a 3.0 GPA. In addition to that, on the slide on the left-hand side, you will see that there are courses listed. Those courses are your A through G courses. And so you are required to have 15 courses, and they do outline for you the number of years that you will need to take in every course. Now, generally speaking, most high schools will satisfy the A through G course curriculum as long as you're passing your classes. Now, for those of you that are not seniors and might be at the junior and lower level that are joining us today, remember that the grade that you get in the class is just as important as the class. So make sure that in order to keep yourself eligible for a UC, you're achieving at least a B grade in history, English, math, science. Foreign language, you only have to take 2 years up, but it has to be the same language. The visual arts, and then of course 1 year of a college prep course. Now, these are the minimum requirements for application. So it should not come as a surprise to hear that in order to really get into some of the UCs like UCLA, Berkeley, San Diego, some of the more difficult UCs to get into, you actually should be exceeding these requirements. In particular, if you are a student that's looking at the path of engineering, or if you're looking at the sciences, I would strongly recommend that you do not stop at that 3rd year of math. Take that 4th year of math, whether it's pre-calculus or AP calculus, but make sure that you're moving forward in that math area. Same thing with the sciences. Although only 2 are required, it is always important to continue to challenge yourself and make sure that you're taking that 3rd, possibly 4th year of a science if you are looking at a science major. Now, so now we know GPA is required. We know that there are a minimum of 15 courses that are required. Now, the next element that is actually great that is no longer required for you is an exam. So the SAT, please know that the SAT or the ACT or the subject tests are not required in order for you to apply or be admitted to a UC. That is no longer something that they consider in their evaluation process. However, they do still consider personal insight questions. And since the SAT is no longer part of the equation, there is somewhat of a greater focus that's going to come in when it comes to the selection of your classes. So the admissions for people do want to know that you're taking the most difficult courses that you're able to take at your school. And they're also going to be taking a close look at your story in your personal insight question responses. So know that although the exam is out, there definitely are other areas that they are going to be focusing on. Now, when it comes to how else you can get admitted to a UC, well, you can also get admitted through ELC, which is eligibility in local context. So that means that if you're in the 9% of your class and you apply to a UC and you submit the information that the UCs need, you would be considered for admissions to a UC. Not a UC of your choice, but you are guaranteed admissions to a UC. Now, before we move on to the factors of review, are there questions about the admissions process, or are there any questions that you have about the UC? No?
No questions in the chat right now, Gloria.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so let's talk about how our applications reviewed. So we know very well that we are going to look at GPA, we're going to look at the performance in the classroom, the number of A through G courses that you've taken, have you taken honors or AP courses, are you eligible for in local context, what other academic opportunities have you taken part in? So what does that mean? Other academic opportunities that you've taken part in at your school are things like dual enrollment classes. A lot of high schools offer students the opportunity to take community college courses while they are in high school. And so that is something that the University of California wants to see if you're taking advantage of. Have you had outstanding performance in any one subject or other? So there are some students that are selected as honors designation based on their AP coursework and their AP scores. And so that's something that they're going to be looking at. And then, of course, they look at academic trends. Did you go from being a C student to being an A student? Have you gone in the opposite direction? What are your grades showing? And then there are a variety of other things that are not academic that the UCs will consider. And that has a lot to do with, your personal investment, your involvement. What are you interested in doing? How have you been involved in your community? What kind of changes have you made to your community? And of course, taking a look at exactly where you reside and how close you are to their school, because one of their commitments is to ensure that students in their areas have the great opportunity to go to their institutions. Are there any questions about the UCs at all before we move into the Cal States?
We do have one question. Let's see. Do we have to take AP classes to get into a good college? So I guess the importance of AP classes.
So that is a really great question. Do you have to take AP classes to get into a good college? The answer to that is it depends on the type of student that you are. So, colleges and universities, they want to see that you're challenging yourself, right? Now, that said, the school that you go to may have a lot to do with whether or not you're able to take AP classes. So there are some schools that limit the number of AP classes a student can take. There are some schools that screen the students that are taking AP classes. And then there are some schools that don't offer AP classes. Now, all of that information is actually information that your counselor provides in one way or the other. The UCs are able to see something that's called a profile for each one of your schools. If you've never seen your school profile, I strongly encourage you to go look at it. And the profile is pretty much like the roadmap of your school. It says how many APs you offer, how many APs the students are allowed to take, what is the process for students being able to take those APs? So some of those questions are quickly eliminated and removed from the equation. Now, if you are an incredibly strong student and for some reason you've never taken an AP course, then in the PIQ questions or the personal insight questions, at that point in time, you have an opportunity to say why you didn't take them. But do know that curriculum is incredibly important. So schools are looking to see that students are being challenged and that they're challenging themselves with the most difficult courses they can take.
So we have a couple follow-up. So one, where do I look up my school's profile? And then the other one, would my AP test scores affect, or would your AP test scores affect you? So I'm guessing if you take the AP test, how does your score affect your application?
Great questions. So the easiest way to look at your high school profile is actually just go to your high school counselor and say, can I please take a look at my high school profile? They should have a copy of it, or they should be able to tell you what adult on campus would have a copy of it. I would tell you to go to your school's website, but it's not always posted. So go to your counselor and ask them. Ask for AP scores affecting your admissions decision. So they will not. AP scores will not affect your admissions decision. And the reason that they will not is because admissions is meant to be fair across the board. So imagine if you're a student at a school that never has been offered the opportunity to take an AP because APs are not something the school offers. Well, it would be unfair to then say, well, you didn't take any APs, so we're not going to take you. And so, in that case, that would make it unfair. Therefore, AP scores fall in that same category. The only students that would be able to submit those scores are students that are in AP classes and have had the opportunity to take them. So those will not come into factor when it comes to the decision process. They can actually work in your favor. Let's say that you took AP chemistry and you want to be a biochemist and you got a 5 in the test. Well, that comes into play when they're looking at the strength of your sciences. And so that 5 may say, oh, the student is a very strong science student. So we feel confident that they're going to do well in this major. And that's the only way that it would come into play, is it only works in your favor. It never works against you. Okay, so how much time do we have left so I can gauge how much time we have?
We get about 1140.
Okay, so let's get going with the CSUs, and then I'll answer any other questions that you may have at the very end. So the CSUs are a little different from the UCs in the fact that their focus is hands-on learning. They are 100% committed to ensuring that when a student leaves their campus, they're able to enter the workforce with the skill set that they need to be successful. Now, there are 23 of them. What you should also know about the Cal States is that they have a very strong commitment to students in their local areas. And so their campuses span about 800 miles from San Diego as far as Humboldt. Each one of them has their own slightly different specialty, but definitely do focus on their students within their local region. The Cal State system is the 4th largest public school system in the country. And as I said, their main focus is to ensure that students are able to graduate with the skill set needed in order to be successful in the workforce. They actually provide about 70% of the workforce in California has a Cal State degree, whether it's an undergraduate or graduate degree. And the Cal States are also really well known for being the school that provides the greatest number of teachers in California. Now, know that the Cal States do admit students by region. And so one of the commitments that they have made is that their enrollment will be 95% or will be very, very loyal to Californians. And so as a result, a lot of their students are, for a third of their class tends to be first generation students. The students that are admitted are usually admitted from their local area. So for example, Cal State LA would look at students that are from their vicinity or schools in Los Angeles and will accept those students and give them priority versus a student that might be applying from San Francisco to Cal State LA. That student doesn't have the priority that a student from Los Angeles does. And so, Fullerton does the same with the students in the Fullerton area. Long Beach will do the same. San Francisco will do the same. So they are very much in the commitment of their local school districts. They're committed to their local schools and area. Of course, they do offer a variety of different majors. Similar to the UCs, everything from the traditional to the arts. Health and sciences are incredibly popular at the Cal States, as well as engineering. Nursing tends to be one of those programs that a lot of students apply to. And so there is also, you should know, a pre-nursing program for a lot of different nursing programs because they cannot accommodate the number of students that are applying on a yearly basis. Classroom experience is wonderful and again, really hands-on, but with that hands-on theme for them, one of the things that they have really incorporated is the ability to learn through work. So students do have the opportunity to go abroad even through the Cal States. Now, please know that going abroad through the Cal States is a little bit different than the UCs because the majority of their programs tend to be traditional in nature. So they tend to be more of that language immersion program where you work at a university that has a commitment with the Cal States to take courses there and kind of immerse yourself into the culture, the language, and the people. They do offer students at the undergraduate level the opportunity to do some outdoor education when it comes to research, as well as working in laboratories. We talked about the Cal Maritime School and how they have their students actually learn on a ship for one semester of the year. In some cases, a little bit longer, depending on what their major is. But they do, in all cases, allow undergraduates to do some research as well. One of the undergraduate research centers that has a lot of global recognition, is a center where students have been working on how to create clean and renewable energy. And so that technology right now is something that is critical to our survival as you look at the different changes in our environment. And so undergraduate students have been very involved in doing that work through the Schwartz Energy Research Center. Learn by Doing is a program where students will take their passions and really go out into the community and get invested in the work that they're doing. For example, if you are a music student and you want to work with students in the classroom, you have the opportunity to go into the community and you will be able to work either with a marching band or work in a music classroom to take the theory that you're learning in the classroom and then bring it into real life and get some hands-on experience in that way. Or maybe you want to be that one person who creates a restaurant in your apartment because you're studying food science and you create the appointment only restaurant that comes up from your apartment because you really want to get involved in your work, which is something that a student at UC Davis did very recently. Now, as we look at the cost of education at the Cal States, and this is the cost of education for San Diego, you will notice that there are significant financial differences. Whereas we know that the basic tuition for a UC is about $14,000 a year, the tuition for a Cal State is about $8,000 a year. Now, again, tuition stays the same for all schools. The greatest difference will be your room and board. So your housing and your food will change the cost of your education. If you're a student who attends San Diego State and you live on campus, you are looking at paying about $31,000 a year. Again, the housing, because it is food and room, is anywhere between $14,000 to $20,000, depending on the school, depending on the location. And so that will shift your cost of education. So just know that at the Cal States, very much so, there is also a great opportunity for financial aid. And so students are able to apply for financial aid through FAFSA, and they will receive grants. Not just local grants like the Cal Grant, but also Pell Grants. Scholarships are also an opportunity for students. And similarly, you do have the ability to go to school for free depending on your family income. Now let's talk about freshman admissions and requirements. You will notice that for the most part, requirements for admissions at the academic level are the same for UCs as they are for Cal States. The A through G program is something that all schools are participating in when it comes to the public schools in California. And so they too require that you take history, English, math, science, English, visual arts, as well as college preparatory electives in the same exact number. Now, what you will notice on the slide is that in some cases, they actually have taken the requirement of math, which is a 3-year math requirement, but you'll see that they have said 4 years recommended. Again, the reason that they're saying 4 years recommended is because they're really looking to see that you as a student take a moment to truly challenge yourself academically. Now, in addition to looking at your GPA, before we move into the additional information that is required, I believe that there is a poll that we should be going through. Should have one more poll in there. No, that's okay, so we're going to skip the poll for now, but let's talk about kind of the what other requirements and considerations are taken into account when you are looking at Cal State admissions. So we know that they're looking at your A through G requirements, which definitely are those 15 courses. If we go back here, again, it's the 15 courses within these subject areas. Similar to the UCs, this year, the SATs are not something that is going to be required of students. And so you don't need to submit SAT, ACT, or AP scores. It's not something that they're going to consider. However, they are going to consider some additional elements when it comes to the admissions process. Because they're no longer using the part of the SAT, and because Cal States do not require students to write any personal statements, they do take a look at your work experience, your extracurriculars, as well as your participation in any educational programs. Are you a first generation student? Are you do you come from a low income household? Now, the average GPA in order for you to be eligible for admissions to a CSU is a 2.5 GPA. So just know that, again, you need to make sure that your GPAs are staying high enough for you to be eligible to apply to these institutions. And then, are there any questions? I know that we only have a few more minutes together, and I want to make sure that you guys get the information for the survey that is online. But do you have any other questions about either the UCs or CSUs?
No questions in the chat right now. We did have some questions about community college. But we did share that, you know, California has great community college pathways to get to the UCs and the CSUs. So if they are interested, definitely connect with their counselor to help them get on that path.
Okay. I think, is there one question in the?
Yes, so there is one question that came up. Do the UCs consider joining sports as challenging yourself?
Do the UCs consider sports as challenging yourself? So this is in general for all colleges and universities, so not just UCs. The best way for me to share this is to kind of illustrate this for you. So your application is like a cake. If the foundation, if the bread, if it tastes good, everything else is kind of the icing or decoration on the cake. What colleges and universities, UCs, Cal States, privates are really interested in is seeing what strengths you have as an academic student. If you have been a great academic student, if you have been strong, if you have been solid, if you have challenged yourself academically, then athletics, that's an additional, right? That's the icing on the cake. That's, wow, great student, great involvement, overall great package. But if you've had difficulty academically, and you've done sports and community service and all that other stuff, that's great. But, you know, if you're not a strong student, none of the other stuff can absolve what's happened in the classroom. So the most important part is your academics. It is your grades. It is the classes you're taking. Everything else is great, but it doesn't make up the core of your application. And so with that, I think we have come to time. So I thank you all for joining us today. I hope that you learned some new and insightful things about the UCs and Cal States today. And I wish you a great session for your next session and a wonderful day. Thank you.